This is the shore, and the waves keep crushing in.
Did you disobey orders in the army?
Well, I definitely did. I have to put the mask on while I get back to my studio. I'm at the University of Kansas doing. It was definitely a pain in the ass. Like I was, I was a medic, and I saw my role to involve myself in anything that could influence my capabilities as a medic to save lives. So I definitely involved myself in every decision possible with the ability to say like, no, this could affect medical, and this is how it would affect medical. So I was seen as very disrespectful, very much outside of the disregarding the hierarchical ideas of the military, despite the fact that like that was my role. And yeah, there were plenty of people that, I mean, they tried to take my rank quite often. And they tried to have me arrested for a whole myriad of issues that is it, by the way, is that, can you
Yes,
still hear
I
me?
hear you
Okay.
sound.
Okay, yeah, because there's somebody running a bandsaw next to, in the studio next to me, so I was hoping you could still hear me. And yeah, it was, and even then, like I knew the regulations, and I, despite their belief in my positions, my philosophies, I knew that they couldn't do anything to me. They could try, and they would just get frustrated and pissed off, and that sucked. But it was also kind of part of the fun. But even then, my military service was, as like really looking back on it, there was no. I did everything the way they wanted me to, generally. I followed the rules. I did well. I mean, I was a sergeant, and the only reason I didn't get promoted to staff sergeant was because I got diagnosed with PTSD, which is, you know, in America, men's mental health is like, we don't need it. We just need a stiff upper lip, and we're going to be all right. We don't need to acknowledge that men have emotions. So when I got diagnosed with PTSD, that ended my career, despite the fact that I was getting out anyway. Like, yeah, fuck, am I losing the plot again? I'm sorry. Oh, so, but when I went in almost as a research for art. I mean, oh, do you have a question?
Yeah. So that's why did you go to army? Yeah.
So I wanted to join right at 18 because, I mean, I'm a September 11th kid. I graduated high school in 2002, and like, so I clearly remember that day. And I remember like almost walking. The only reason I didn't walk out of my high school that day to join the military was because I knew I needed a high school diploma. So I stuck around. And thankfully I did that, because it was my thoughts on armed conflict quickly became tempered. Like I remembered, despite the fact that I didn't know firsthand the experience of combat or war, I remembered that it was wrong, and that I disagreed with war in general. And I did have a sense that America's wars were, on some levels, immoral, and but I couldn't quite articulate it then. I just knew that America's wars weren't the greatest. And then, so that was 2002. And then flash forward to 2007, my brother-in-law was, he was a infantry commander and also a veteran of like the battles in Fallujah. So like I got some sense of like knowing soldiers and knowing people that had been in these areas. And then I was coming back from I was helping a class, like a summer camp art class, but I couldn't keep the job because there was no way I could find to fit the teachings of Jesus Christ into my art. I am now and have always been like a firebrand secularist atheist. So like, yeah, when I'm like, oh, hey, I can't relate color theory to the Annunciation. I can't do this. So I left, and then met a kid on the way home on the bus ride, that was going to Iraq as an infantryman. And I'm like, this child looks like they're 12 years old. What the fuck is this kid doing? And I was fairly politically aware. I was still in community college, just dicking around because it was cheap. There was good instructors at the school. So I was taking a lot of political science classes alongside a lot of arts classes. And so I thought I had a fairly good and clear idea of what was happening over there. And then, you know, I didn't really think about joining the Army much after that bus ride until a few months later. I realized like the time span between that bus ride and now 2-3 months later was mostly spent in a blackout drunk. And the people I was with were not great. And I'm like, okay, this is where I should do this because I want to make art about these things, but my opinion's also dismissed because I'm a skinny little white kid that like, I mean, I was, constantly dismissed and disregarded for my opinions because I was also, you know, a young, white, arrogant American boy. So I decided that I could go to the military as a medic and get the understanding, get the knowledge, and then come back and have and be able to speak from a position of authority. And if I went in as a medic, that would mean that I was also trying to do, like, I saw that as the only morally tenable position within any military structure. And I don't care what country you're in. I disagree with militaries and armies. I wish I could talk more to that point. That's just my gut feeling on it. And I wish I could. I mean, the war is wrong. Armed conflict is wrong. Violence is wrong. Not to say that there isn't a time and place in which you need to fight and be prepared to fight, but that needs to be purely defensive. Like a standing offensive army is offensive. It's wrong. If I walk into somebody's house carrying a giant bat, I don't care how close, like, well, in America, it's guns, but like if somebody walks into my house with a gun on their hip, I don't care who they are, how close I am to them. I'm like, okay, why are you here? What happened? Like, I'm immediately threatened. So that I need to be prepared if under threat, but otherwise, like, why even show off that gun? Why walk around with that big stick? You're just being an asshole. And that's kind of my general feeling about militaries and militarization. So yeah, I just greatly disagree with it. We need to be de-escalating a situation, removing threatening behaviors rather than maintaining them even in an implicit way. Yeah.
How was your training? Were you did you prepare before you joined the army? Like, were you aware of what was going to happen in
Oh
training, or?
no, I actually it was like 4:30 on a Monday at my house at my apartment. I was drunk as hell. Somebody said something dumb, like really offensive. And I'm like, okay, everybody out. I'm in the wrong place. I'm joining the army. Everybody get the fuck out. Then Monday afternoon, I was in the recruiter's office. And then the following Friday, I was on an airplane and gone. Like, it was immediate. I was like, I'm done. This is where we're going. This is what I'm doing. And I'll figure it out as we go.
Where were you going?
I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for basic training. And I was there for 8 weeks or 12 weeks doing just like the very, very much what you'd see in American movies, just sleeping in a room full of bunk beds and a bunch of young, hyper aggressive men, shooting guns, blowing things up, doing a lot of walking and a lot of exercising. Then I went to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas for 16 weeks, where we did more shooting and exercising and blowing things up, while also getting trained as a basic emergency first aid responders. Like, we were getting licensed to be able to drive an ambulance in the civilian world, but then being trained to operate at just below the level of a doctor. And then after that, I operated I went to back to Fort Benning, Georgia, to become a paratrooper and jump out of airplanes. So that was, I mean, it was so from September to June, I was in that initial training. And then oh, go ahead.
No.
Then I got stationed in Schweinfurt, Germany, and I was there for 2 years.
Yeah, you signed at the recruiting office directly a contract for airborne.
Yeah.
Airborne.
Yeah.
So while the first trainings, did you remember, I don't know, what's the movies called about the hard training, and or were you
Is literally a game they're playing. They're just playing a game, and they're playing a role that they're told they should, that we should be scared. But I mean, I wasn't. Like, what are they going to do? Hit me? Or they kick me out of the army? Whatever. So I would get yelled at, and I'm like, okay, Roger, drill sergeant, and like just not really give a shit, because I didn't believe it was real. So everything I was doing was not because I would like felt like I would get hurt if I didn't. I mean, outside of the times that like it really would be dangerous if I didn't do something. I was just like, cool, they're gonna yell at me. One of these days, it's gonna be my day to be picked on, because that's the way this is supposed to work. And then when it's done, I'll move on. And that's kind of how it went. And after a week or two, the drill sergeants kind of go, yeah, he's not gonna, we can't fuck with him. Like, we could yell at him, but nothing's gonna happen. He's so.
And were there a few situations where or that you would criticize or find good about that training?
Oh, I think all of it was horrific, and in retrospect, completely immoral and completely unethical. It is just reinforcement of Americans' ideas of masculinity, which is strictly white, is strictly violent, and completely invalidates everyone around it. I mean, a white masculinity in America is completely self-centered, completely narcissistic, and the role that basic training played outside of the guns, outside of the explosions, it just served to inspire young men or young masculine people aspiring to be men to exercise that masculinity in the most violent way possible, whether it was physical violence or emotional violence. All it did was serve to inspire that. I was rewarded for explosive anger, not scolded for it.
What was immoral about that?
Because it invalidates the people around you. Like it's their existence is, if their existence in any way contradicts mine, then I must remove them and must diminish them. This is how it's kind of dictated to be a military masculine, that you reinforce racial stereotypes, you perpetuate racial what's the word? Derogatory language aimed at anybody that isn't incorporated into white America. The way in which we would discuss Iraqis or Afghans, the way in which we would discuss women. I remember even after the basic training, I remember being in Grafenwald. Is that how you say it? Grafenwald?
Grafenwald.
Yeah, like over on the like border with Czech. We were in training out there, and one of the meetings we were having was the ethics of war. And we got caught in I got caught in a 45-minute conversation. I was the only one saying this. But at the end of the conversation, the compromise was that if a pregnant woman was being used as a human shield, you shoot the pregnant woman in the legs. Like, that was what the training reinforced, is that you didn't find a way to save the woman. You assumed she was part of it. You assumed that she volunteered to be a human shield. That she wasn't a victim in this, that she was a part of it. She was the problem. And that was a very consistent message, explicitly and implicitly, in every single moment of my military training.
Did you notice a change? Did you meet German soldiers in Grafenwald and Schweinfurt? Did you have lessons with them?
I didn't. I can't remember why, or if we did, I don't remember it. I mean, in my time in Germany, was only about a year in reality. Like the 6 months leading up to my deployment to Iraq, and then the 6 months before I moved to Italy. So my experience in Germany, like while it was a year, the way in which our bases are handled over there, we are so, I mean, you kind of know. I don't know what part of Germany you're from, but like in Bavaria, we very much still have a standoffish posture toward Germany and toward even the Germans, at least in a military fashion and within our military. At least that's the way I took it. or remember it.
How?
Well, we again, just like every young American, well, most Americans, we tie culture to morality, and so if we see American culture as the peak, then we are better. So that's a general philosophy within America, and then you take that philosophy to such an extreme within the military and within these young men and women who are all, I mean, it's just ungendered masculinity, but they all are believing that. And then you come up against Germans who are also have a lot of pride in their country without hitting, well, at least in 2009. I haven't been following what the nationalistic movements within Germany now, but I know it's on the rise across the world. But I mean, our nationalism was coming up against German pride, and it just wasn't a good combination, I don't think. And then also many Germans that I interacted with they tended to be upset, like going, hey, you know, World War II was 60 years ago. Can you, why the fuck are you still here? Like you're still occupying my country. And we disagree with it. So there was, I ran into that a lot. At least those are the parts I remember.
Did you know about the soldier law and the citizen in uniform?
Yeah, that's great. That's not an American philosophy, not anymore, at least. I think part of that law was probably because America was spearheading things, much the same way we have tried to, in every conflict we've been in since World War II, is regulate how the governments of the countries we come in are going to operate after we leave. And the idea I think it was Thomas Paine who said this, like for a democracy to work in any fashion, like it's the responsibility of the citizen to be aware of what's happening in your country. And I think that actually gives you greater pride to be aware of its faults and aware of what's happening and critical of it. But America's since since forever, since its inception, has never really wanted to award the critical thinkers. It's always had a basic sense, maybe not on a level of like the headlines, because like people from Martin Luther King to astronauts, or I mean, which are even military people, but the scientists and NASA, like there was a time that we did, it was very, very brief time between the 40s and 70s that we did really appreciate those with critical thinking faculties. Still not to the full extent that they should have been, but now it's even worse. It's the worst I've ever seen it. I mean, shit. There are people in my nation that are just like, "Oh, you're a scientist that studies viruses. What do you know? I'm not gonna wear a goddamn mask." Like, are you fucking kidding me? And even like people, like very, very intelligent people, say things that are just like what the fuck are you talking about? I got dismissed in a conversation recently. As I was speaking, I can't remember the topic, but I do remember that it was something that I was very well versed in. And my dad goes, well, he's a teacher, so you know how they are. What does that mean? Like, and how is that disqualifying because I'm a teacher and an academic? Like, what? So so the ability to critically think about your orders or about the authority structures within our nation, no way.
When you signed on, you were already aware that you were going to Iraq.
Yeah. I mean, I felt I needed to. It wasn't just that, like, okay, go ahead.
No, for what reasons?
If I was going to be there as a medic, that's where I like, if I was going to be in the military as a medic, that's where I needed to be. I wanted to save as many lives as possible. I didn't care what nation they were from. I needed to save some lives, and I needed to I also needed to see it with my own eyes to be able to speak to it. There was also the feeling that that I think a lot of young men are looking for, is like this sense of adventure and danger. I mean, I'm still kind of a radical daredevil. I mean, now I'm a little bit more conservative with the risks that I take, and they're more philosophical risks than actual physical risks. Yeah, I wanted a sense of adventure, and to be able to come home and articulate these experiences in a way that might change some minds. I wanted to change minds in those very moments. I had a lot of discussions and a lot of conversations with people about what we were doing and why we were doing it. I kept pointing to things around us, like going, don't you see that? This is what's happening in front of us. If we look around, the base I was on was Forward Operating Base Kalsu, which was in kind of central Iraq. It was on Highway 1, maybe, I don't know. So when we drove down the highway, I mean, we were going 120, 150 miles an hour generally, and just the motto was drive it like you stole it. And we were, at that speed, we were about 2 hours south of Baghdad. But I'm looking at this base, I'm looking at the places that we lived, and like the infrastructure, the buildings, how it was built and how it was run and maintained. And it was all Halliburton. Everything was a subsidiary of our vice president. Like, I'm like, can you guys not see just this on its face is criminal, let alone the actions we're taking when we leave our base in a war that is completely unjustified. And we're not doing any good for. I need to smoke another cigarette while we're talking, because I'm starting to get a little fidgety talking about this. They cram you in. It is. I mean, you're on this massive cargo jet with airline seats that are just strapped to the floor, and then you're carrying 2 green duffel bags and a giant backpack, and the backpack goes on your lap, and you're in a row of 10 people. Like, talk about, you don't want to be in the middle seat. I mean, you're crammed in there, and then you fly off into Baghdad, and there's combat takeoffs and combat landings. Nobody tells you about a combat landing. I didn't expect what that was, but the plane goes from like 15,000 feet and nosedives to like 200 feet and then pulls the nose up just in time for the landing gear to touch down. It is scared the living shit out of me. Then we start getting off the plane, and getting off the plane in Baghdad, the smell, it was like jet exhaust and rot. And immediately sent me into like probably one of the first panic attacks that I ever recognized. Because I was like, this is the last thing I'm gonna smell is jet fuel and rot. And it scared the living shit out of me. So that was my first introduction to Iraq. And then things kind of calmed down. Cigarette's gone out. And then kind of once my fears started subsiding and I started falling into a rhythm, like witnessing what Iraq was. And it was just this war to fuel military contracts and fuel the military industrial complex, but in very, very 21st century ways, which was kind of frightening and shocking to me. Like in America, I don't know how it's described in the rest of the world, but they say government contractors, but what I started seeing that as is mercenaries. Because like Blackwater is a mercenary group. I mean, it's a bunch of for-hire soldiers. They have an air force. They have helicopters. They have it's ridiculous how much firepower they have, and they're not the only ones. And there were people like trying to recruit me from my aid station. Like I still have contract left with the US government, and there was another company, Triple Canopy, which I think they're out of Australia, and yeah, they were trying to pull me off right then and there. They're like, hey man, we can get you a job, 140 a year right now. Why, like, quit, come work with us. Or then there was this was 2009 when I was in Iraq. I was in the green zone, and again, the green zone on its face, a very, very logical scenario. You have a neutral space in which no one government has any say, and you guys can get together and have discussions, right? Like a mini UN, essentially, is the way it was kind of like sold, at least to the American public. And that's what my understanding of it was before getting there. But I was there on like, I was staying at one of Saddam's palaces for a couple days. It's like I had a 3-day pass, and there was a pool, and it was kind of nice and relaxing. But one morning I'm eating breakfast. I walk out the door of the breakfast room and turn left. And literally as soon as I'm out of the doorway, a car bomb went off, blew out the windows in the kitchen. What? Oh, I'm not. Zoom said I'm about to raise my hand because it recognized my hand in the air. That was, anyway. So I walk out of the room, car bomb goes off, and I'm a medic. I can hear people are hurt, but I wasn't allowed to carry a weapon at that time. And I'm also would not go out there without a weapon. And they wouldn't give it to me. They wouldn't allow me, medical personnel, to go render aid, because that would have been considered against the law because I was in the green zone. So then I sat in a bunker all morning. sat in a bunker while upwards of 200 people had just been killed right outside. Like 8 car bombs went off throughout the green zone that morning. And so I was like kind of wrestling with that. And then finally we're allowed to go back outside. And my buddy and I we climbed up. This is such a surreal story. We climb up to the top of the high dive at the pool to look out on Baghdad hours after car bombs have gone off, and there's still pillars of smoke all over. Like, seeing it in person was such a trip. And so my buddy and I are standing up there, and we see these 2 Blackwater helicopters that were flying around in a circle, like kind of in tandem with each other around the green zone. And they had snipers riding on the skids of these tiny helicopters. And then it finally hit me. This wasn't a place for negotiation or neutral grounds. This was just yet another opportunity to hire mercenaries by the US government. It was another opportunity to fund the military-industrial complex. America never gave a shit about Iraq, it's never given a shit about any countries we've invaded since, well, I mean, to some extent, probably World War II as well. But no, like, I mean, everything has always been about American capitalism and the manner in which America does capitalism, which is a extension of how Western society has colonized forever. So yeah, seeing all of that, it was, I remember a lot of guys I served with, they were like, man, Fitz, you got so angry after Iraq. I'm like, yeah, because I saw what the fuck it was. It wasn't just some theoretical idea of it in a political science class. And these were thoughts I had before going. I'm like, yeah, it's a war for oil is the way I would have worded it beforehand. But no, it's, again, we don't give a shit about the oil. What we care about is the ability to build infrastructures overseas in another person's country. We care about having the ability to use implicit and explicit power to manipulate other countries through military means, through violence. And that's what I saw.
And you got sent for holidays in one of Saddam's palaces. Was that the holiday resort?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was surreal.
Okay, and how was camp life? What did you do all day practically?
So the first platoon I was in out there, I would maintain all of my medical supplies, maintain the ambulance that I had, which was a Cayman MRAP. If you know what those are, they're just a big mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicle. I have a massive truck. Like this is my truck that my thing is sitting on. It's a big truck, and this truck could fit inside the back cabin of the truck I was driving. And so yeah, I was maintaining that and then working out. When I got to Iraq, I weighed 150 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilos, but I weighed about 150 pounds. When I left Iraq, I weighed 210 pounds. So the first platoon was vehicle maintenance and work and exercise. And then I left that platoon because, as I said at the beginning of this, I was a huge pain in the ass. That platoon tried to have me arrested for being an atheist.
How did that happen?
So I was reading a book by Christopher Hitchens called God Is Not Great, and How Religion Poisons Everything. And that was upsetting to several people. And then they would the sergeants, and I was a private, like very young in the military, but I understood that the only people that can have the final word in matters of faith were chaplains. So if anyone came to speak to me about religion that wasn't a chaplain, I mean, I saw that as a debate. We're going to have a conversation. There's no like, I'm the sergeant, this is the last word. So they kept trying to talk to me about the importance of Jesus in our jobs. And I go, no. Jesus has nothing to do with this. And let's say we're getting bombed. Are you going to call for your Bible, or are you going to call for me? And they didn't see I was fully capable of doing my job if I didn't believe there was a higher power guiding me.
I wasn't aware that faith in Christ plays an important role in the American military.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the people that join the military, by and large, are of extreme faith, and I do mean extreme. I remember a guy in training. I was walking by his bunk, and I heard him say, like, we all talked about, well, like, why'd you join? What'd you do? And like, that was a very common conversation. But as I walked by this guy's bunk, I heard him say, well, I joined to kill for Jesus Christ. And I turn and I look at him, I'm like going, hey, dude, like, number one, I get it. He's not here to do it himself. Number two, pretty sure that wasn't his message. Number three, you remember you're a motherfucking medic. Like, what do you mean killing for Jesus? And then those were fighting words to him. He was like, you're just an atheist. And like, he wanted to fight me for being an atheist. But no, the faith in the military is, I mean, the faith in America plays an important role in everything. Most people, let me rephrase, most people do not believe we were founded on secular values. Despite the First Amendment having freedom of religion in it, nobody actually believes that that's what they mean. They mean that you get to believe in Jesus however you want.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Is that in Colorado that you have to pray or go to the mass in the military? Or I don't understand what the connection is there, or the narrative how to kill for Jesus.
I wish I knew too. I don't know how that works. It's a cognitive dissonance that is happening here, and this really strong magical thinking that's happening. I mean, even now, today, it's really crazy because they're not just relying on horse dewormer. Like, I mean, I in my head, I believe there is somewhere in this nation that a pastor is standing over a bottle of horse dewormer, blessing it, and selling it to people. I am certain that is happening somewhere. I don't have any evidence of that. I couldn't give you like a source for that, but that is how deeply entrenched white Jesus is in our nation. You either believe or you are un-American to these faithful, to the extreme faith in America. And that was true even in the late 2010s when I was serving. I was considered un-American. I was considered a traitor by some I know even then. There was someone that would not print atheist on my ID tags. Like, it took 3 or 4 months of me going, I need atheist on here. And she was like, no, that doesn't exist. That's not a religion. that's not real. I'm like, you don't get to say that. You're not allowed to say it. Yeah, just huge arguments about religion and faith within the service, and me constantly reminding people that like that we are allowed to have different faiths, period. And you can't, like, I have more faith, I think, than a evangelical American Christian. That's a bigger conversation, I think. Let me backpedal that and go to a little bit less loaded statement. I don't believe that we need to have faith in a higher power to do this. And because of that, they considered me un-American and unable to serve fully our nation, because they believed it was a nation founded as a Christian one.
And so in the your first deployment, you spent the most time in the camp working out, and you were a medic for the soldiers in camp.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, did you experience a lot of injured comrades? What was that desert diseases or?
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly, for the most part, just some really common things that you'd find with the desert. Lots of dry skin, lots of we did find a skin condition called leishmaniasis on one person, which is a flesh-eating bacteria. But then a lot of it was really some basic, like, typical healthcare things that, I mean, certainly traumatic and certainly life-threatening, but most of it was just like any other emergency room you'd find in the world. Broken bones from accidents. But when I was there, it was the first couple months I was there, it sounded where I was sounded the way you'd expect a combat zone to sound. There were a lot of explosions, lots of gunfire. Thankfully, not many combat injuries. But then status of forces changed in March 2009, and almost immediately the attacks ceased. There were still a few roadside bombs, and thankfully not many people were injured. I think my entire brigade only had two people killed in action over the year we were there. I mean, there was still, it was a lot of STDs, but a lot of basic just accidents in just the normal kind of way.
Did you go out and treat Iraqis?
No. I did treat some Iraqis that were on base, that were injured a few times, but no. Once I left the platoon that where I was on an ambulance crew, and just moved straight to the aid station. I was in the emergency room then for the next 9 months of my deployment. I didn't see much off base. I think I left base 3 times after the first 4 months. So no, I didn't get much interaction with the local population. Afghanistan, when I went to Afghanistan, there was definitely all of my patients, all of my combat injuries were Afghans, but Iraqis, no.
In Iraq, how was the communication to you, from you to the rest of the world, and to what did you know where the other nations were?
It was, I mean, that was, so I could communicate with home very well. Like we had, my base was very well, there was a lot of infrastructure there. And there were a lot of ways to call home. There were a lot of ways to access the internet. I mean, I had internet in my room. So yeah, I was really fairly well connected, and our dining facility was it was a pretty big building and pretty big cafeteria that had 4 rows of tables with 4 rows of TVs. So the incoming information, like one row was CNN, one row was MSNBC, there was another news network, and then there's Fox News. So we did see news 24/7. But yeah, it was pretty easy to communicate, pretty easy to get information.
And were you, let's say, satisfied? Was there quite a level of, I'm here and this is how they report?
Oh God, no. God, no. No, they do not talk about what is happening over there. That would be, because of Vietnam, the journalistic philosophy today and the government philosophy is that you do not tell people the reality of war, because the reality would immediately enrage the population. If people really understood what I went through and what we were doing over there, nobody would allow it. I don't think there is a person of sound mind that would pull all of that information in, and like if they had a full appreciation for it, would they go, oh yeah, I mean, if I could go back to 2003, I would still say, yes, Bush, go into Iraq. No, there's no way in hell they can't do it. Journalism is going to withhold information based on DOD's guidance, the Department of Defense's guidance on the information that they pull in and put out. And for some reason, they believe that saves lives. And they want the American people to be happy with our war effort, not aware of our war effort.
But wasn't then everybody on camp quite angry?
Oh no, God no. They believed that was the right way to do it.
Did you get teach this?
No, it's just kind of implied. Like when I said earlier that people have said people like me were the reason we lost the Vietnam War. Like I don't think that person quite understood what they were saying when they said that. But people like me are the ones that are paying attention, reflecting on the information that we get, and then saying, okay, I feel like I've studied this issue enough to say definitively this is good, bad, or other. Like I can make an informed comment and commentary on the situation. That is the people that they say are the reason we've lost wars. Because when he says that, he's referring to the protesters of the Vietnam War. The people that were like, hey, we're killing civilians and children and even our own people to fight a useless war. And those were informed comments. And my informed comments are the ones that hurt the war effort, not help it, in their view, in their opinion. So, yeah.
What did they tell you about Iraq? What did you get lessons about Iraq?
think the lesson that I thought was most distilled to me was that we are suppressing what actually happens in the war zones. I went on a patrol with my brigade commander, and we went down to Basra, like in southern Iraq, to meet with the province's governor. And when I got in the car, or when I got in the Humvee, a military intelligence officer got in the Humvee with me, and he had 2 briefcases. And I was like, okay. I look at him and I'm like, so what's in the briefcases? And he goes, a smart soldier would know not to ask that. And I'm like, oh, so it's cash. Cool. Good to know. And he kind of smiled like, okay, if that's what you want to believe. But no, we were, and then like, this was a 6-hour drive. And by the end of this 6-hour drive, like the intel person and I, we had gotten a little bit more chummy. And yeah, we were going down there to pay them off. We were going down there to pay them off because of Iran. When we were driving down, when you're on patrol, there is definitely kind of a sixth sense for trouble. Like there's general chatter and goofiness on the radios, despite the idea that we must be professional in all things and at all times and don't like transgress. Anyway, but there's chatter on the radio, people talking, people having conversations. But then there was a point, and in almost every firefight I've ever been in, every tense situation, a few minutes before, everybody's getting quiet and everybody feels like something's about to happen. And the environment changes, the streets clear, just something changes and you notice it. You may not always be able to put your finger on it, but something changed. And everything got quiet. And after a few minutes, I'm like going, all right, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? There's something not right about this. And the intel guy goes, you're right, but what are you seeing? Why are you thinking that? Why are my cigarettes going out? And I'm like looking around, I'm like going, it's clean. The buildings are rebuilt. This is freshly painted. This place seems to be maintained and well taken care of. And this was also an area where we had kind of not really retreated from, but certainly our presence had become reduced. And this intel guy goes, well, yeah, this is Iran. Iran is pumping money into southern Iraq. They're pumping money into southern Iraq, and they're the ones that are rebuilding this nation. So we're down here to try and do a little bit of the same thing. So like the way that we go into nations is we go and bomb the living fuck out of them, and then we give the money to the governments to do with as they wish. Iran, my understanding from what I was seeing and a little bit of what this intel guy was saying, Iran was coming in and giving money to rebuild it, to actually to help the infrastructure and help the people. And America doesn't. We never gave a shit about that. Again, we were there to fund the military-industrial complex without any concern for the nation other than our ability to control it. And another piece of evidence that like I saw in this and that it just makes me so fucking angry. So flashing forward to Afghanistan, the combat outpost I was on, I'm in Afghanistan in 2010. This outpost was along, like when we first invaded Afghanistan, there was that line that separated the Northern Alliance and the Taliban controlled areas. And that line, this base was placed there in 2001. This was one of the first outposts. And right next to it, like from one of our watchtowers, I could spit on the roof of a clinic, the clinic that served the majority of this valley. So 9 years in, and this clinic that has had an American base next to it for 9 goddamn years still didn't have running water. If America cared and wanted to, was interested in nation building, now, granted, this is just my anecdotal experience, and I'm certain there are probably elements I may not have considered, but how could we be in a nation for 9 years fighting a war that we called nation building from the jump and not give a clinic running water? So instead of investing our own resources in developing the infrastructure of the nations we've invaded and bombed to hell, we give it to the government that is loose knit, not quite. I mean, we've completely destroyed the government that was there beforehand, but then expect the new people to have their shit together enough to even use the money effectively. When we had the tools, we had the tools in Iraq, we had the tools in Afghanistan to actually do the nation building, even with just the bodies that we had put in there. Hundreds of thousands of troops on the ground at any one time at the peak of these conflicts, and we couldn't stop to dig a trench, place a pipe, and give a hospital or clinic running water. Like, what the hell? If we were actually interested in it, we are the richest, most, for good or bad, we are the richest, most powerful nation the planet has ever seen. And then we're over there going like, I don't know, how do we get them water? How do we rebuild this place? I don't know, it must be a cultural thing. Yeah, it's the culture that we will go in, kick somebody's window out and go, you got to fix your window, dude, and walk away. So as you can tell, this is why they call me a traitor.
How was the situation? How did you arrive in Afghanistan then?
So I got transferred to Italy in summer 2011 or 10. Summer 2010, and then I waived my dwell time, like the automatic cool off period that happens between deployments, so I could go to Afghanistan. Again, for the same reasons I wanted to go to Iraq. Like I felt like I needed to see it. I had a sense of adventure. And I also think I was probably a little suicidal at the time. Like I was ready and willing to die, especially if my personal mission was to save lives. I was okay giving my life up, attempting to save anyone's life that I could. So yeah, then I get to Afghanistan. I get sent out to FOB Airborne, and I was with the 173rd Airborne, 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry. Like, have you heard of or seen the documentary Restrepo?
No.
So Restrepo is a documentary done by Sebastian Junger, and it followed my battalion on their deployment from, I think it was 2007 to 2009 to the Pesh River Valley along the Pakistani border. So now I'm going to this unit that is like this legendary battalion within the Army at that moment. Like, this documentary had come out within the past year and it was nominated for an Oscar. And it's like, it's a very unflinching look at the experience of combat. It is very much apolitical and just kind of documenting the day-to-day experience of one of the most heavily, they saw some of the most intense combat since Vietnam or World War II. One of my friends was one of the first living people since Vietnam. Well, he was the first living person to receive the Medal of Honor since Vietnam. And then I know 3 recipients of the Medal of Honor that came from this battalion. So I go down there and I'm excited about it to be a part of this. And then I replaced a guy. He quit, which honestly is the right thing to do. If you do not feel capable emotionally or physically to provide medical support to these young men, yeah, you should say, hey, I can't do it. But this guy also quit in the middle of a patrol. So so I had to go out and replace him. And then I got sent out to Combat Outpost Conlon. And I was there for a few months with them and saw quite a bit of combat there. And yeah.
As a medic.
Yeah.
And you were going out on with little troops, or just in big convoy, patrols, or?
Well, both. So there were times that we did go out in big vehicles and drive up and down the roads. But then there were also times where we would go walking out several miles and climbing the mountains and camping out there for a night or two. And then, yeah, firefights, both from trucks, like while we were in our vehicles, and firefights while we were walking around. And yeah, it was very much, it was kind of what you'd expect from a infantry unit. Like the Taliban and the groups that fought alongside them, that was another thing about the kind of level of notoriety that the 173rd had, is that they also came looking for us. Like they know who's who and what's going on within our own troop movements. So yeah, we were definitely a target because of our notoriety, because of that documentary. Yeah, so they came looking for us. Yeah, lots of firefights. And there was one morning, and so in 2010 in Florida, there was a church that decided it was a good idea to burn the Quran. And holy shit, so these guys went nuts. Like the Afghans were fucking pissed about it. And that got heavily promoted by the Taliban and pushed by them about, like, look how terrible the Americans are. They're burning the Quran. So yeah, that got, I mean, there were riots there. I wasn't off base at that time. I was still on FOB, or God, I can't remember where I was, but my friends were telling me stories about the windows on their trucks, these like 6-inch thick bulletproof windows, were cracked by the rocks that the civilians were throwing, that the local Afghans were throwing at them. Like, it was crazy. There was also one morning, it was an election day in Afghanistan. I was in Iraq for 12 months, and then Afghanistan for 4 or 5. And that election day morning, we took more incoming rockets and mortars between 5:30 in the morning and noon than I did the entire year in Iraq. I think it was something like 60 different rockets. I think, I can't remember how long ago I did the math, but it was like every 7 minutes on average, a rocket was coming in to FOB Airport.
Fort, there what?
FOB, Forward Operating Base, FOB. And yeah, it was crazy. And then thankfully, again, not many people were hurt. There were like small injuries, nothing that was like life-threatening from it. And then going out to Cop Conlon, COP meaning Combat Outpost, COP. Again, thankfully, not many. I think I had one life-threatening combat injury. But there were, little nicks and bruises and cuts and scrapes. Yeah, Afghanistan was it was a wild time. Even had the stealth bomber come through and drop some bombs.
How was it? How was it in Afghanistan? Did you probably met lots of Afghan people? Did they tell you to fuck off, or were they all nice, or?
Oh, the Afghans were incredibly nice, incredibly friendly. They tended to be happy to see me if I was just walking around. They would smile and wave. When I was dealing with people in a more official capacity, there was still a lot of not animosity, but fear. And this fear was inspired by the Taliban. Like something that people were asking me about after we pulled out, and they're like, "Are you surprised that the Taliban took over so quickly?" I'm like, "You really think that we had control over that nation?" The Taliban had instilled fear all over the country, to the point that, like, when I was offering to get a package of medical supplies to this clinic that didn't have running water, when I was offering to get them like just bandages and other medical supplies, they were like, I don't know. And they didn't really want to talk much about it. And they agreed that they would come to me the next day with a list of supplies. And they left. So we left, went back to our base, next door. And we watched on the video a group of people walk in maybe 10, 15 minutes after us. Like, we had cameras all around the base, and they were in there for about an hour, and then they leave. And we assumed it was Taliban. And then they came to me the next day and they go, "We don't need anything." They weren't going to accept our help, because if they did, then the Taliban would kill them. And this happened all the time.
But how did this then happen so fast that they take over? Did they come from Pakistan, or were they on the outskirts, or were they guerrillas?
They were guerrilla fighters. So they were mixed in with the population. They were definitely living in the caves around us, which, everybody knows there's substantial cave systems within Afghanistan. So yeah, it was a pretty was a pretty crazy scene to recognize. Like while we were walking around, I mean, I could see the average Afghan person being fine, waving and being okay. But then you'd see the people that, so in America, the way it's talked about, it's like going, they're people sleeping in caves. And so, yeah, you'd look at somebody and like going, yeah, they have definitely been living out in the wilderness. And they weren't carrying a gun, or else we would have been like, hey, we know you're Taliban. We didn't outright accuse people of being in the Taliban. We definitely would fingerprint them or get a lot of some basic information from them. But generally, yeah, we'd see them everywhere. And they knew. Well, this is also the funny thing. Let me get back to like how Americans talk about the Taliban as just people living in caves. My uncle, again, very recently, because of the pullout, asked me, he's like, oh, what they look like? I say people living in caves. They're like, ha, that's what I thought. It's just these people out there living in the woods. And I'm like, dude, do you know what I look like? Like, I hadn't showered in 2 weeks either. My uniform was black because of like, I didn't have laundry. Like I had 3 uniforms without a laundry facility. I mean, I was just as dirty and just as, probably even more gross. Because I'm like, I didn't have any of the things. Like they still probably had access to a river to at least bathe in. I had to stay on base. Even when we had showers, there was one night I was fresh to the base, and everybody's like, "Well, hey, we got shower water, so be sure to shower the next day before it's gone." So at like midnight, my base had a really big open space that I was afraid to walk through to get to the showers because of snipers or rocket fire. So middle of the night, I decide I'm going to go shower by myself. And I start walking, and there's no moon, it's pitch black out. And I start hearing growling, and then rocks getting kicked up like something's starting to charge. And there are wild dogs that live on our base. So I'm like, holy shit, I'm about to get attacked by a dog. Had to run inside. I'm like, cool, I guess I'm not showering tonight. So even when we had access to showers, we didn't really, sometimes they were inaccessible. So yeah, it's again, the American culture that was like equating us as better in some fashion because we're cleaner. And it's like, no, man, we're just as dirty.
Did you see something about it, of any improvement of Afghanistan on how did they, from what did they live? Was there trading in your area, abroad? Was there I don't know, bigger companies, Afghan companies, or?
No, I mean, there was a bigger city nearby, Jalrez. And was that the name of it? I was in the Jalrez Valley, Jalrec, and I was the like first of 3 combat outposts that were in that valley. And I was toward the opening of the valley, and there was a bigger town there, but even then, it was still probably only 5,000 to 6,000 people, and then the valley only had a 2-lane road that went all the way down through it, and then you only had so much space for buildings and homes and businesses on either side of it, sometimes none. And so yeah, it was, I mean, there was typical type of trading, typical kind of commerce you'd expect from a small town. Yeah. And they seemed generally to be able to just go about their day-to-day business, which just, it was interrupted obviously by big firefights, lots of shooting, but once it was done, they would go back out and go get back to their day.
Did you experience some drug trade?
Not that I noticed. I don't know. If it was happening, I didn't see it. But that also may have been above my pay grade, and it was typically something I didn't really concern myself with.
No puppy fields.
I didn't see anywhere I was, but I mean, that doesn't mean they didn't exist. I just didn't see it.
And how was the communication with other countries? Did you meet them on patrol, or were you kind of aware what they were doing, or did you?
There were no other nations that were in my area. Like when I was in Bagram, one of the main air bases there, you did kind of come across them. But now once you get out to the smaller operating bases or outposts, there aren't any other nations generally that are there. So if there were some there on airborne, I didn't see them. But I was there very briefly, only a few weeks before going to the smaller outpost.
And did you ever train with foreign countries?
We did have Afghans that lived on my base, so we did start to train them and start helping out with that. But that was only like the last couple weeks I was there, so only for about 3 or 4 weeks did I really have any interaction with even the Afghan army.
So did you train the police or the army?
The army.
And did the Afghans have what kind of weapons did they have? Did they have all American weapons or Russian weapons?
I honestly can't remember. I feel like they had American supplies and American materials, but I can't say for certain enough to make a definitive statement.
How was it different to Iraq? Did you feel it was the same war, basically, or totally different?
It felt different, I think, because I was so far away from bases that had a lot of infrastructure. Like when I was in Iraq, the bases the bases I spent the most time on were Kalsu, which had 5,000 people on it. I was in Baghdad at the Baghdad International Airport, which is a huge, sprawling complex of large and small kind of installations that were connected, but very loosely. So, I mean, I don't know how many people were there, but thousands from all nations. Kalsu did also have, some a lot of different elements, not just military elements, but also more general mercenary contractors. This is another really something that I haven't mentioned before, but they were so American companies or companies owned and maintained by Americans that would hire mercenaries, and they would hire the mercenaries from we had a big population of Ugandans that would serve in our watchtowers and be armed guards for our dining facilities and shops. And like, so the way I read it is that you had an American company that bid for, you know, a multi-million-dollar contract, and then they were paying all of these Ugandans $10 a day to guard our bases. So it was really enraging to me. It was, but then you get to Afghanistan, where I was. It was such. We were living at the best living conditions I was in were plywood huts that we built ourselves. And in fact, let me. I have a couple of pictures of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Let me pull that up. No, I'm sorry. Do you want me to back up?
No, it's just no. I've just got one more question, because I thought in Iraq too you said that you were just Americans, and then now you say something that the UDF was there as well. Was there the Canadian Army too, the Belgian one, or?
Oh well, I think I misunderstood the question at the first time, as in like, how well could I communicate with back home, or what information was I getting from back home? So I misunderstood your question. But no, there were on Kalsu, there were a lot of different forces, but they weren't traditional military forces. They weren't armies from a foreign nation. I think I saw some a couple times, but in general, it was contractors and mercenaries from other nations. So the Ugandans that were contractors that guarded our gates in our buildings.
Contracted by the military, the U.S. American Army.
What, by the U.S. government, I think, is a more direct term on it. And then there were Indians that, or I think it was Bangladesh, not India, that a lot of our food workers were from, more contractors, or I should say subcontractors. So yet again, another multi-million-dollar contract by somebody. Then it was then paying people pennies a day to prepare our food. Yeah. So there was a little bit more of a multinational representation, while I wouldn't say it was multinational cooperation, because I don't think that any of these people were going to be I mean, they didn't have much other choice from their nation. They may have been making very little money for what they were doing. It was still, they didn't have much of a choice. They would have been making less money in the nations that they came from, but that doesn't mean they were getting paid what they were worth and what they were they should have been valued at.
But they were they were fighters as well, not just they were regular army stuff.
Well, the Ugandans didn't do regular army stuff, other than like they didn't go out on foot patrols or convoys to patrol. They just stayed on base and guarded those spaces.
I heard,
and that was
in Afghanistan, the Americans collaborated with the Gorkhas, the Indian Gorkhas?
Oh, if that wasn't within my sphere. Again, not saying it didn't happen. I just don't know anything about it.
Okay. No. Where's this?
This is FOB Airborne, so Forward Operating Base Airborne in Wardak province of Afghanistan, at the mouth of the Jalrez Valley. Like the direction I'm looking right now in this image is toward the opening of the Jalrez Valley. And this was along that Northern Alliance and Taliban boundary back in 2001. My tent was the second from the last one.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the spaces we lived in. Yeah, I thought I had more pictures, but I still, this is the one that I think is the most, I mean, Afghanistan is such a beautiful country. And this isn't, I wish I took more pictures when I was there, but I just didn't. So yeah, I just thought this was a stunning view and such an odd juxtaposition, this military encampment in this just really beautiful landscape.
And in that camp, there was international people as well.
At this base, I don't remember seeing them. Well, no, let me rephrase. Yes, we did have dining facility workers that were not American.
From where were they?
That I can't quite remember. Again, I was only on this base for a couple weeks. But yeah, I know that there were non-American workers running our food. There were Afghans that worked on the base too. Like we had a bazaar on base that there were a lot of Afghans that ran a bunch of shops and stalls. There was a Chinese restaurant on base that had the greatest hamburger one of the best hamburgers I've ever had. And then they also had a side of, it was honey cheese fries. I don't know how they made it. I don't know what it was, but it was honey and cheese on fries. It was just like completely, everything was caked in honey and cheese. It was so good. Like I would go back to Afghanistan for that.
And what would the Afghans sell?
So jewelry and rugs. There were a lot of antiques. But the thing that really sticks out in my mind are antique guns. So guns that were like stamped with the what is it? The Queen, when the British had invaded, they left a lot of guns, like muskets, and so you could get muskets that were engraved with Queen Elizabeth, or I think that's who it was. And then also, a ton of jewelry, lots of lapis lazuli. I had a friend, I didn't get any diamonds out there, but a friend of mine bought a couple diamonds for a few $100s, sent them back to the States, and then got them appraised for several $1,000s. Like, it was wild.
That sounds like a tourist hotel, a souvenir shop.
Very, very much.
How would that do? I have to imagine, come to our camp and we need some souvenir supply instead of maybe some goods that could, there's not, Afghanistan has lots of earth. What's it called? Tradable things. Maybe even nice food.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I mean, that's what they were kind of bringing. And it looked like, if you watch American movies about the Middle East and whenever they're walking through, oh God, have you seen the third Captain America movie? And like in the beginning, they're in, I can't remember where they are, but there's a big fight scene in a little shopping district in the African nation that they were in, and it looked just like it. It's like tiny little train or tiny little steel boxes with a cloth overhang, and then like tables built out of logs and sticks that have blankets and trinkets and baubles everywhere. And that's what what you're imagining is probably not far off from what it was.
And so how was there your everyday life? Did you?
Oh,
yeah.
It was generally very boring. Didn't even have a gym. Like I would sit around chain smoking and bullshitting with friends, bullshitting with the guys in my platoon. And then there would be, and that could happen just like nonstop boredom for days and days and days, and then nonstop firefights for days. I think my longest day was somewhere between like 48 to 60 hours, like maybe some minimal, like a few naps in when you could get it, but it was really just go because people are shooting at you and people are trying to bomb you, and you still have to go about the normal patrols and your normal daily business, but then shit happens and you have to respond to it. So my typical daily life was, guy just walked into the building without a mask on, like he's, anyway, fucking America. Yeah, so we would have some pretty intense firefights, pretty big, pretty long days, and yeah.
Did you help some NATO troops for support?
I never had to respond to a firefight with any other nation. Like it was just, I think they actually timed the Afghans moving in with the end of the fighting season. So once they felt the fighting season was over, then the Afghan army moved in. So we didn't really do much with them.
What do you mean by fighting season?
Oh, summers. There is a distinct fighting season that happens during the summer months and before it starts getting really cold, and also some of the mountain passes get blocked because of snow and ice and just that weather. I've never had my mask fall below my nose. I don't get it. How do they just walk around like it's nothing? I think I may be getting a little bit more agitated than usual because I just saw that we've been talking almost 2 hours. So I'm a little, maybe, yeah. So, the summer months tend to be when the fighting is the most extreme.
And then it's winter season, and
then they can't get their ammunition from Pakistan, or they can't get their people from Pakistan. So
how would they? Why not?
Oh, because the mountain passes in between Pakistan and Afghanistan would start getting blocked. And just from typical weathers you would find in higher elevations. I mean, the Hindu Kush isn't an easy mountain range to traverse in the first place. So when it comes to winter weather, it's not going to happen.
What's the next picture you wanted to show me?
I think that was it. I thought I had others, but that was the only one I really had. But I'm also thinking, seeing the time, I need to eat some dinner before I have a class I have to go to. So I would love to continue talking about this if you have more questions or you want to keep talking about it, but I think I should probably get going.
I would love to talk with you still about thank you for spending so much time. I've got so much more questions. I did. Okay.
Well, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank
and I
you.
look forward to next week.